Welcome to another episode of the Creating Belonging podcast. Today, I have with me Rick Clemens. And Rick, I'd love for you just to introduce yourself in your own words.
Yeah. So I'm a guy who struggled with belonging for my entire life. Even at 60 years old, there's times I still struggle, but I'm a gay dad, and I let that whole experience of coming out of the closet drive the rest of what happened in my life to the point that it became a business for me. And I'm a coach and author, podcaster myself. And I've turned the whole concept of coming out and belonging into something that really helps people step into their own world and realize they can let go of a lot of things that they were doing. A lot of your stuff, honestly, is very similar, Justin. I think like as a community, we find ourselves reclusive at times. We deal with overbearing thoughts and processes, that keep us in the closet. We minimize who we are to help keep everybody else happy. And then lo and behold, we don't feel like we ever belong. So that's my story. And I think I'm going to stick to it for now. So
I love it. Rick, well, I love you're already like bringing the model in, giving us a little refresher.
Well, you told me that's what you want me to do. No, I'm kidding.
You're just showing that you've done your homework, which I love.
I have done my homework. Do I get an A? That's all I want to know. Do I get an A for the
A?
Yeah. So
you got an A.
Awesome.
So one other thing I like to do, you revealed some identities, but I also like to just kind of ground us and make sure there's any other, see if there's any other identities that you want to share with our audience as, most are just listening.
Yeah, I feel like there's this other piece of myself that, so you already, everybody heard I'm gay, but after that experience of finally coming into my truth, I realized I started opening other closets of my life and going, this is who I want to be. And I was very reclusive about wanting to be my own business owner and have my own business. And it's interesting, Justin, to see how that one moment of life, which wasn't one, it was every ongoing moment of life, opened me to the realization of how much I was missing out on belonging so much in my world in so many spaces. So I became an entrepreneur. I started speaking on stages, started doing my podcast, and suddenly Rick's a pretty happy camper because he opened himself up to like, hey, this is what it feels good for me to belong in the world. So
Yeah,
facet of me.
yeah. I've got to say, I've been out on my own for the past year, and there's something so liberating about it. And I get to do the work that I love doing every day and make a choice about it.
Yep.
And I've been so happy. So I totally get it. Thank you for sharing. And I love the work that you do in, coaching other gay individuals, in their journey, which I'm sure maybe that will come into our conversation. But I guess to get us started, have you, what life experiences, as you were going through the work of creating belonging, the book, what life experiences came to mind for you as you were reflecting on your journey?
Well, I think the biggest one is from a very young age. I never have ever really felt like I fit in places. So I really strived hard. And one of the biggest lessons I learned about myself in striving to belong is a lot of times I was striving to belong to the wrong space or with the wrong people. And that revealed itself in some very interesting ways as I grew my business and I got around some pretty well-known entrepreneurs out there in the entrepreneurial space. And it's almost like I inserted myself in their world, which was fine, but guess what I was wanting? I was wanting to belong. So I'm like, well, why aren't they accepting me or why? And the best example of that is Chris Guillebeau, who used to run World Domination Summit in Portland, Oregon. He's a New York Times bestseller. He's written the book, $100 Startup, and a few other amazing books. Went to the conference, kind of got to know him. He offered to be on my podcast a couple of times. And all the way through that, Justin, I was like, I just want to be on the WDS stage. I just want to be on the W stage. And I got really angry at times because I was never being seen for who I was. And I reached out to their team and like, hey, here's how we usually do it. When we find somebody that we want, we come after them. I'm like, okay, there was a lot of growth there. But I was trying to belong because if I could do this, then I'd fit in, right? And then one day recording the podcast with Chris after I launched 40 plus gay men, gay talk. And he's not gay. It was a different podcast at the time. It was 40 plus real men, real talk. I was talking to real guys about the stuff we guys need to talk about. We got done. I had already kind of let that dream go. Like, okay, 7 years going to the conference. No, I love going to the conference. And guess what Chris said? Have you ever been on the WDS stage? Of course, I wanted to kind of slap him. I'm like, you run the freaking program, man. You should know, right? But after 7 years of multiple speakers and all this sort of stuff, I used to be a meeting planner. And there it was, Justin. It dropped in my lap. The opportunity to speak. But
Mhm.
here's the difference. I wasn't striving and yearning like this is going to be the thing. And actually, that's one of my proudest moments speaking on stage. Because I was just like, okay, let's go have some fun. Let's just go do this because I get to give back to this community that I really love. And I get to go. It was such a big shift for me. It brought me out of this interesting space of going, here's why I'm doing this, and got me into a space of, here's the real reason. And
Mhm.
that started unlocking other ways that I saw myself being overbearing in my own way about relationships, minimizing other people's talents, a lot of times holding up. Like, I can't believe that I didn't get the attention from this person or this person that I wanted. So then I would literally like hole up. I do my work, I do my life. And people would say, we don't see you much anymore out there on internet and, social media. I had to grow up. I had to realize that my belonging was me creating belonging in the right way versus my idea of what belonging was. So that's
Yeah.
one of them.
So I'm curious, how did that shift happen for you?
Humility. I started realizing, and I had a few mentors saying, Rick, here's the thing. You are a brilliant guy. You got a great message in it. And one mentor in particular said, and you got a huge effing ego, man. And I was like, "Mm, okay, that hurt.
Mhm.
But then I was willing enough, and I think this is part of when we think about how do we belong or how do we move through some of these things that's in your beautiful process. You have to be able to see it to believe it. And then
Mhm.
you have to embrace it and fix it.
Mhm.
And I grew up in a narcissistic home and I thought I'm never going to be that. And I worked really hard not to be that, except
Mhm.
I was in my
Mhm.
own way. Well, not near to the level, that my father was, but and that was the shift, man. The humility and realizing, ooh, maybe the reason I don't belong is people see ego, and a little bit of narcissist in me. It's always got to be the way I want to get things done. And it hurt, man. It hurt to see yourself that way. But I took
Yeah.
some big, deep breaths and said, okay, let's start doing some work. And that's
Yeah.
probably when I really entered into that personal development stuff was that at that time.
Okay. So that was the catalyst, was kind of like getting more into your own kind of personal development.
Mhm. Well, I
Okay.
figured if I'm going to be coaching people about, being themselves and, moving out of their fears and excuses, I had to be living and breathing my walk and talk. I didn't want to be out of integrity. I lived 36 years of my life out of integrity before I came out of the closet. And it's interesting, Justin, because everything kind of comes back to that experience. Like, well, that was the real catalyst, but that also was the catalyst that fed the other catalysts that even to this day continue. There's things
Mhm.
that happen, in the last few months where I'm like, oh, no, that's not how I'm going to fit in. That's not how I need to feel like I need to fit in, or that's not what I need to be doing, or don't isolate because of that. It's a interesting. I mean, when you reached out to me, I'm like, oh, this is really interesting because there's a lot of alignment in what you speak on and what I do.
Mhm.
And I think for many people, if they really realized what they can do when they start embracing what it looks like to be, your own recluse, or if you're letting overbearingness be part of who you are, or
Mhm.
you minimize everybody else, you minimize your feelings. I'm a huge, it's okay. I'm good because I
Yeah.
want to take care of everybody else. And that's really detrimental to my own well being. So
Mhm.
that's
I
how it
love
kind
that
of came
you're
about.
I love that you're in this place of, finding belonging through your own enlightenment, through your own reflection of who you are and developing yourself, because I'm digging deeper into just thoughts around the creating belonging work and more research around authenticity.
Mm.
And have been having just this week, having very interesting conversations around authenticity. And authenticity, I don't know if you saw, is like the word of 2023.
Yep.
um but I think it's being used in a way that isn't a way that serves us best.
Mm,
Like, I think we see authenticity a lot of this, like, it's actually fitting in
mm,
rather than digging into deep self-awareness, self-reflection, understanding who we are, and then showing up with intention
mm.
of who we really are and want to be for the world, not to fit in the world.
Yep. I see authenticity as and maybe it's because I just interviewed somebody from my podcast and we talked a lot about radical integrity.
Mm,
When you can be radically authentic, that's saying, I'm not going to fit. I'm going to be my own unique self. I'm going to allow that
mhm,
piece of me to be truly seen. That doesn't mean you get to go be a jerk. That's not what I'm getting at.
mhm,
But I would much
mhm,
rather, I'll give you a good example. When I speak on stage, don't do it as much as I used to. You will never, ever, ever see me in a suit and tie. In fact, you'll be lucky if I'm even wearing khakis and a tucked in shirt because authentic Rick comes out, jeans, untucked shirt, bright pair of shoes, bright colored pair of shoes, because that's my bold, big energy. I want to just be comfortable in who I am. Plus, I move a lot on stage and everything. And I tell
mhm.
my meeting planners when they hire me, like, here's the deal. I will never be the buttoned up suit and tie guy, but I'm going to deliver like nobody's business to make sure your audience has and experiences a transformation. And the way I'm able to do that
Mhm.
is I get to be authentically myself on stage, the same way I'm being authentically right now, having this conversation with you about serving your audience. It's just not going to be
Yeah,
in a suit and tie.
yeah,
And I never had anybody push
yeah.
back.
Yeah, well, and that's why they're hiring you, right? For you, for the unique
Hmm.
perspective that you bring, for the voice that you have. So, yeah, and I think that's great kind of table stakes to put out there, because if somebody was like, "No, actually, we need you to wear a suit," and you'd be like, "Well, that's not me, so I'm not gonna be doing you a service because I
Yep.
can't be authentic in this work." I love that.
And so another part of my business is I actually, coach public speakers on building their speaking businesses. This is
Mhm.
one of the things I drive home. If you show up differently on stage than how you market yourself on your website, that's the surest way to ensure you never get another speaking gig or vice versa. You need to
Yeah.
show up authentically who you are when you show up. And again, I think back to your process, it's really understanding how you perceive yourself belonging in the world and not
Mhm.
just perceive. It is like embodying that piece in the world.
Mhm.
It's huge.
Mhm. Yeah. There are some other things. I wanna go down another little rabbit hole, and the way that you were talking about kind of this ego, kind of pre-enlightenment, and not that it's the only enlightenment that you've had, I'm sure, but, like,
Right.
that particular one of that ego and kind of the hardworking, it just makes me think of my experience as a gay man and how I was always trying to be better or better
Mm.
than.
Yep.
Because then if I'm better, then, like, you can't look down at me for whatever reason, like, I'm
Right.
still doing better. And that is something, I don't know, I think I'm still trying to shake that a little bit. But I'm curious how that resonates with you and your journey.
Well, I think it ties back into, okay, if I had this mentor really like me, then I'm in that circle now. I'm better.
Mm,
And then if I do this, I mean, I don't really watch the downloads on my podcast because I'm like, I get emails and stuff. I'm like, cool, people are listening.
mhm,
You know, that's my barometer. Yes, I see the numbers,
mhm,
but that's whole better than, and I think, we as gay men, we kind of have to be that way, so to speak. I'm saying that in a way because I'm not saying we have to, but we kind of think we have to be that way
Yeah.
because we're so driven in the community. We got to have, the abs and the biceps and,
Mm,
this and the cars and the da 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 da, right? And so much of it gets judged around that. And I lived kind of adjacent to that life for a while. I lived in Orange County, California,
mhm,
and there was a perception of how you were supposed to be. And that was when I was married to my wife. And there was a lot of push. And honestly, had I not come out of the closet, we probably would have got divorced anyway because I just wasn't going to be what she wanted. I just couldn't do that.
mm,
And it was, ooh, this is how you get to be known. This is how you get to be who you are in the world. And it's one of the things that cool, go be who you want to be. I'm a full proponent of that. Right.
mm,
But when I realized if that's how I'm going to live my life by that standard, I'm not going to be happy. I love
mm,
nice things. I love going on great trips and everything, but I don't need it to be because I'm better than somebody else. It's just, this is what I do. This is what
mhm.
I do. And it was hard because when I had the ego narcissist part of myself full life, and it's still there, folks. I don't want anybody listening to think, oh, wow, he's very super enlightened. No, hell no. It shows up when I least need it to show up. And then I'm like, what are you doing, Rick?
Uh-huh.
Um, but I think when that was present and then feeling the pressures of, my ex-wife, like we need to have this and need to have this, and I need to be able to be a stay-at-home mom, and we need to have the big house. It was just like, for what? For what? And that's still kind of my philosophy. I always say, okay, for what? Doesn't mean
Mhm.
I won't go after something really nice, but I often now put it in that little like petri dish of for what? What am I doing this for? Because if it's not truly going to bring me joy and happiness, and I don't hang out with people who are very materialistically driven, and I don't do well with people who are putting on the fake.
Mhm.
Show me who you are. Just show me who you are. Then I
Mhm.
get to decide if I get to show you who I am. Well, I always show people who I am, but for the most part, I'm not very. I'm pretty damn transparent, which scares a lot of people. Like, I can't believe he talks about this stuff.
Yeah,
It's
I
who I
love it.
am.
I love that. I wanna shift gears a little bit because I'm curious to hear a little bit of, so you, being married to a woman and then kind of coming out later in life
Yep.
and how that had to have influenced current relationships and, like, your belonging and in that dynamic of those relationships, and I'm curious to
Mhm.
hear a little bit about that transition in your life and how you found belonging or refound belonging.
Well, it really started at a pretty young age because there was a part of me that knew who I was. And I'm talking really young, like 5, 6, 7 years old. I knew there was something, quote,
Yeah.
different about me, right?
We all knew a long time ago, it's
Right,
just when
right. Yeah. But that kind of ties to that feeling of being a recluse, right? Let's hide this. Let's not let people see it.
Mhm,
And plus, I was surrounded by some very, quote, overbearing philosophies with religion and parents. And my parents were great. They were loving people, but this is how you're going to be. This is who you are. And I'm like, okay. So then, of course, then I had to step in and put my mask on and minimize my truth. And so that's what started to contribute to me not feeling like I belong. So now let's take all of that, bring it into high school, bring it into college. I jumped really quickly when I met my wife. I was working at a university as a food and beverage guy. She worked for me, and I'm like, oh, I connect with her. This could work. Like, okay, cool. And now I get to be, hey, I'm going to make everybody else happy. So I step out of being a recluse about this. I diminish the overbearingness of, oh, look, he's a great guy. He's getting married. And then, grandkids came along and all this sort of stuff. I love my kids. I will never regret, this whole experience. But
mhm,
suddenly all those check boxes, Justin, started getting unchecked. I don't have to hide. I don't have to deal with the overbearing thoughts. I mean, yes, parents had other bearing thoughts because I didn't marry somebody of our own faith, whatever. But the minimizing, and suddenly, guess what? I belonged. Oh, the family loved me. They thought I was great and all this sort of stuff.
mhm,
So then the divorce happens. Everything happened all over again. I felt like I had to go back into hiding because they wouldn't accept me for who I was. And the overbearingness of you've disappointed us. You're ruining our, your faith in God and blah, 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 blah. So everything happened again. And suddenly I didn't feel like I belonged. So then I started seeking it out in our gay community in many ways, everything from, hooking up constantly and all this sort of stuff to, hey, any guy that came along, let's go. Let's put the white picket fence up and call it a deal, right? Because it was
Mhm.
all those things were in conflict, right? And that was really in the moment that I started putting things in perspective of, wait, I'm just repeating this pattern. I had a lot of good relationships, not a lot, not like thousands, but some good relationships building up to when I did meet my husband. And the one thing I saw that really brought me into that relationship and has probably been the sustaining factor of 22 years together is he never wants me to hide. He probably gets a little embarrassed at times, like when I did a stand-up comedy routine recently. But there's not that feeling of I can't be who I'm meant to be. He
Mhm.
makes me very, very much feel like I belong. And the other thing that kicked in is in the midst of that whole experience of coming out, I worked for an organization that was very warm and welcoming of LGBTQ. So when I stepped into my next role, I'm just like, I'm going to be out. And
Mhm.
now in the company that I have the pleasure of working for, I'm very quote out.
Mhm.
But I do it in such a way that it's coming from, I'm never going to hide. I'm never going to be overbearing and shove this down somebody's throat. I'm never going to expect others to minimize who they are because here we go. We're right in my brand, right?
Mhm.
It's such an amazing way to get to live. And again, everyone listening, I'm not perfect. I don't want to come off like, oh my God, this guy. I'm not walking on water. I'm too fat to walk on water. I float more than anything. But I feel like that's when you see those moments, Justin, that you're like, okay, I just keep putting the piece of the puzzle together, the piece of the puzzle together. Make it
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting because I'm hearing a couple of the themes of, finding the places where it's okay for you to belong,
work. Hmm.
and kind of, pushing aside. I don't want to say running from. I don't necessarily hear running from, but like pushing aside places that aren't serving you
Yep.
because we do. I mean, if we're those of us who have the privilege to have that agency over our lives, and I think that's an important thing to call out is that not everyone has that agency in their
Right.
lives to be able to move into or move out of communities that aren't serving them well.
Yep.
Um, and that's where I hope to do so, some of the work in getting people to understand like, hey, we need to make room for other people so that they don't need
Mhm.
to leave. Yeah.
Well, the thing is if we don't make room for that, we're actually causing one of the first pieces of your process. We are contributing to people becoming recluses. As soon as
Mhm.
we tell somebody, put your
Yeah.
mask on and this is how you have to show up, we're guilty of it. And this
Yes.
is why I always talk about I'm never going to, in the grandest scheme of things, say I don't want somebody to be who they are.
Mhm.
My caveat to that is provided you being who you are is not emotionally or physically hurting somebody else. Because the
Mhm.
minute you're like, okay, I'm going to be an evangelical Christian that says LGBTQ people should be not on the planet, I'm sorry, you don't get to be who you are. That you're hurting some people. But if
Yeah.
you say, I want to be an evangelical Christian that says, help me understand you better, I'm going to probably have a more open conversation about that. But if
Mhm.
you're pushing me into wanting to go hide, you don't fit in my world because then the overbearingness is showing up. You're trying to minimize me into being who I'm supposed to be, and you are not creating any sense of belonging for anybody. And I know it's
Mhm.
a big call for us to kind of push those virtues and values out there into the world, but I would love it if none of this had to be happening.
Right.
That's a different space.
Right. Yeah, it's so and I'm coming back again, I think, to that authenticity piece of, like, being someone else. And that's something that and I don't think it has to be in authenticity. I don't know. I go back to like, and I tell the story a lot of I once worked with authenticity because if you're an asshole, that just
Mhm.
means you can be an authentic asshole. I'm
Right.
like, but nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to be an asshole today.
Well, I
There,
think
there,
there's
I
a
think,
certain resident of Florida, I think does, but we won't go
like,
there.
I mean, the thing is, though, yes, and there's something about their, it's actually tapping back to their perceived survival.
Yep.
And so, thinking about like whatever it is, and I don't love to talk about the extreme cases like, assholes in Florida. But I think that uh, in general, we want to do good.
Yes.
We also, number one, need to survive, right? And so it's when we feel that our survival is threatened that we are going to exclude someone else potentially. But I don't think that's our default mode. I mean,
No, I would agree. And maybe this will help the listeners a little bit. This is one of the most pivotal moments in me being trained as a coach. My instructor, we're working on we all the coaching I do is based in like your energetic profiles and all this sort of stuff. And so she threw a really interesting scenario at us. So a guy goes and he murders 3 people. How does that make you feel? Well, of course, how do you think it's gonna make anybody feel? Oh, yeah. No, 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 right? And so we were playing with the energetic chart that like, well, does that make you feel angry? Does it make you feel confused? So how could it make you feel love and empathy? Well, most of us are like, no, not going to happen. Right. So she kind of let all that hubbub happen. Right. Then she said, okay, so now let me reposition the question. This guy murders 3 people, but in that moment, he was doing the very best he could with what he had at his disposal to be who he was. It actually starts to change how you perceive something because you start to see somebody through a different lens. Maybe he was trying to belong. Maybe he was acting out of some sense of somebody who was really overbearing in his life. Maybe he was coming out of his reclusive state and going, this is how I'm going to be seen. And, maybe he was minimizing some other side of him for all this time and suddenly it just popped.
Mhm.
When you start to embrace other possibilities, I think for me, that's where I feel like I got some of my humility from was, okay, but what else could be possible? How else could I look at this?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the I would also add in like, what don't I know?
Mhm.
I've improved, and I'm not amazing at it, but I've improved at withholding judgment on many, many things
Mhm.
because I don't know the whole story.
Right.
And I want to wait until I know the whole story before I start making a lot of judgment.
Mhm.
And it's interesting. So over the past, 3 years since I started writing the book, I have found new depths of allowing grace for others, for myself, because I'm like, I have to if I'm gonna write this book about accepting others, where, belonging is created at the intersection of authenticity and acceptance. So if I have to really think about how do I find acceptance for others that may not have the same values as me? Because that's what I'm asking of people. I have to be able to do that. And so it has brought me to um, allowing space for information that I don't know.
Well, and when you put that out in the world, it also feeds the fire for the world to bring that back to you.
Hmm.
How can the world show me empathy? How can the world show me another way of looking at something?
Hmm.
It's hard because we as humans are like, nope, this is the way I see things. Okay, that's fine, but what happens when you say it's not this black and white? I mean, in the work that I do and probably what you do, I can't see things as black and white. There's too many nuances to like what's going to happen when somebody comes out of the closet. I can't say, well, here, just this is exactly what's going to happen. This is going to happen. Your ex-wife's going to do this. Your ex-husband's going to do this. Your kids. It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you that you're going to get embraced by the entire LGBTQ community because that's not going to happen either.
Mm-hmm.
But when we look at it from that other side, Justin, and go, and again, this is work. This is daily work for me to try to really like bite my tongue with certain people in Florida to just see things and like, okay, well, let's see, but how else can I see this? How else can I try to understand that? And this is where I think we as a society right now are really struggling to like exercise this empathy energy,
Mm-hmm.
but through work like what you're doing, because if we could have empathy, how does that then create more belonging?
Mm-hmm.
Instantly, just having empathy creates belonging.
Mm-hmm.
It says, I see you, I hear you. I may not agree with you, but there's at least a doorway that's now a little more open.
Right. I still see you as a human.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I love, in this conversation, I think we have definitely hit on, authenticity, finding yourself, understanding yourself, and then also that acceptance piece of finding empathy for others, allowing grace, understanding that we don't have all the information all the time. So I feel like we have definitely hit both sides of the of the scale there on acceptance and authenticity. So Rick, I want to thank you for your time today. I'm just
Oh, of course.
noticing I try to keep it to 20 to 30 minutes, and I think we're going to be right in there. So I've enjoyed the conversation. I have a feeling we're probably going to keep talking.
I have a
Right.
feeling so. I have a feeling too. And thank you for the opportunity. I love getting to be on somebody else's podcast and go, let's jam. Let's jam and just see what we can
Yeah.
throw out there in the world that maybe will impact somebody or several people's lives or get somebody thinking differently. So thank you for giving me the privilege of being on your podcast, man.
Thank you so much, Rick. And where of things that you might want people to find, you've got your podcast available
Yep.
kind of everywhere, right? And it's
Yep.
called
There's two of them. The first one is Life Uncloseted. And the second one is 40 plus gay men, gay talk. You can find them anywhere podcasts are at. And then if you wanted to follow me on anything, Instagram, the Rick Clemens, or my website, Rick Clemens, CLEMONS.com. That's where you
Awesome.
can find me. So,
Rick, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I
of
enjoyed the
course.
conversation. Hopefully, everyone else does. And join us again for another episode of the Creating Belonging podcast. Thanks.